Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is The Secret Doctrine. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the secret doctrine with life, force, or gravity. The imponderable fluids have had their day. Mechanical forces are less talked about. Science has put on a new face for this last quarter of a century, but gravitation has remained, owing its life to new combinations after the old ones had nearly killed it. It may answer scientific hypotheses very well, but the question is whether it answers as well to truth and represents a fact in nature. Attraction, by itself, is not sufficient to explain merely planetary motion. How can it presume to explain the rotary motion of the infinitudes of space? Attraction alone will never fill all the gaps unless a special impulse is emitted for every sidereal body, and the rotation of every planet with its satellites is shown to be due to some one cause, combined with attraction. And even then, says an astronomer, science would have to name that cause. Occultism has named it for ages, and so have all the ancient philosophers. But then, all such beliefs are now proclaimed exploded superstitions. The extra-cosmic God has killed every possibility of belief in intra-cosmic intelligent forces. Yet, who, or what, is the original pusher in that motion? When we have learned the cause, unique et spécial, that pushes, we will be ready to combine it with the one which attracts, says Francoeur. And again, attraction between the celestial bodies is only repulsion. It is the sun that drives them incessantly onward, for otherwise their motion would stop. If ever this theory of the sun force being the primal cause of all life on earth and motion in heaven is accepted, and if that other far bolder one of Herschel about certain organisms in the sun is accepted even as a provisional hypothesis, then will our teachings be vindicated, an esoteric allegory shown to have anticipated modern science by millions of years. Probably, for these are the archaic teachings. Alright, so it is important to note that in my theory, right, the one that I ascribe to, my speculations, the sun is a conduit, not a generator. I have many reasons for that. If you have not been following along in this study, it may not make sense to you, but if you fall back to just the science part of this, I've explained it several times going forward already, but the emanation point, I believe, is much farther out in space. We do not know exactly where, but I believe that there is an interconnectedness between all of the stars, and they are all just distribution points. Martanda, the sun, watches and threatens without abandoning the central position to which his mother, Aditi, relegated him. His 7 brothers, the planets, he pursues them, turning slowly around himself, and follows them from afar, moving in the same direction that they do, on the path that encircles their houses, or the orbit. I want to make one thing abundantly clear, right? I don't believe at all in this study, but if this knowledge were true, like true, real knowledge, absolutely the truth, then they would not have said 7 planets. That is something that you'd have to absolutely pay attention to. Yes, they could see 7 with their eyes, but there are at least 1, maybe 2 more planets out there, and back then they absolutely would have thought of Uranus Pluto. They would have thought of Pluto as a planet. Absolutely. Especially for the purposes of what is being described in here, right? It's not a moon of something else, so it wouldn't be attributed to Mars or anything like that. It is a standalone planet just as much as Uranus is. And if this was true knowledge, like really true, verifiable knowledge, it would not be his 7 brothers. That is an important thing to understand as we continue going through these speculations. It is the sun fluids, or emanations, that impart all motion and awaken all into life in the solar system. I do not dispute that at all. It is attraction and repulsion, but not as understood by modern physics and according to the law of gravity, but in harmony with the law of manteveric motion, designed from the early Sandia, the dawn of the rebuilding and higher reformation of the system. These laws are immutable, but the motion of all the bodies, which motion is diverse and alters with every minor kalpa, is regulated by the movers, the intelligences within the cosmic soul. Are we so very wrong in believing all this? Well, here is a modern and great man of science who, speaking of vital electricity, uses language far more akin to occultism than to modern materialistic thought. We refer the skeptical reader on the article to an article on The Source of Heat in the Sun by Robert Hunt in Popular Science Review, Volume 4, page 148, who, speaking of the luminous envelope of the sun and its peculiar curdy appearance, says, Arago proposed that this envelope should be called the photosphere, a name generally adopted. By the elder Herschel, the surface of this photosphere was compared to mother of pearl. It resembles the ocean on a tranquil summer day when its surface is slightly crisped by a gentle breeze. That is patently untrue, right? We have the capacity now through satellite technology to have a view of the sun. And while there is what appears to be an envelope around it, you cannot in any way, shape, or form compare it to a tranquil summer day at any point in the cycle. And it goes through cycles, both active and inactive cycles on the sun. If you are unaware, we are coming into the grand solar minimum right now, I believe. And so there are cycles where it is more tranquil, but it is never tranquil like a summer day, ever. Mr. Naismith has discovered a more remarkable condition than any that had been previously suspected. Objects which are peculiarly lens-shaped, like willow leaves, different in size, not arranged in any order, crossing each other in all directions, with an irregular motion among themselves. They are seen approaching to and receding from each other, and sometimes assuming new angular positions, so that the appearance has been compared to a dense shoal of fish, which, indeed, they resemble in shape. The size of these objects gives a grand idea about the gigantic scale upon which physical operations are carried out in the sun. They cannot be less than 1,000 miles in length, and from 200 to 300 miles in breadth. The most probable conjecture of which has been offered respecting those leaf or lens-like objects is that the photosphere is an immense ocean of gaseous matter. What kind of matter? In a state of intense apparent incandescence, and that they are perspective projections of the sheet of flame. We have a footnote here on photosphere. And the central mass too, as will be found, or rather the center of the reflection. Solar flames seen through telescopes are reflections, says occultism. But see what occultists have to say to this in Book 1. That it is not a reflection, right? I understand exactly where they are coming from. I do not hold that particular belief. I do believe that there is a spiritual realm, right? But not that everything is a reflection necessarily of it in the way that it is described through Buddhism and the various things that we have talked about through here. We are here fully incorporated in a material plane on purpose for a voluntary existence to learn lessons. All of that is in direct opposition to most of what is being said in these books, right? That is simply true. And my speculations and their speculations are different. And once again, I do not believe that the reflections of the flames that we see through telescopes, right? First off, they're not flames. They're filaments. Electrical filaments, as a matter of fact, formed of plasma. This is an incontrovertible fact nowadays. We know that. Some of them are thousands of miles in length, hundreds of miles in breadth. That is true. Sometimes they come off and they snap and they throw stuff out into space in a leaf-like projection, right? But they're not flame. It's electromagnetic radiation. You are seeing an ionization process when you see these things happen. The ionizing wind from the sun enables that. Magnetism enables that. All of these things are real. These speculations are great, but once again, they are speculations, and you can believe anything that you want to believe. I'm not here to stop you from believing anything. We just try to apply a little bit of logic to it. It is entirely possible that there is a spiritual realm with a spiritual sun located in the exact same place that ours is, and that is actually the source of everything in the universe. But it is highly, highly unlikely. It is, however, not unlikely that there is our sun and then there is another sun farther away and that the two are connected. We have proof of that. It is not necessarily even speculation to say that there is communication between those and a transfer of energy across vast distances through electromagnetic force. That is pretty close to incontrovertible as well. And that accounts for what you are trying to make an excuse for, right? You are trying to explain something you don't understand, and that is perfectly fine. There is nothing wrong with speculations. But the actual facts are not relaying or reflecting what you're trying to say here. It just doesn't. Back to the text. Whatever they may be, those sheets of flame, it is evident that they are immediate sources of solar heat and light. No, actually, it's not. They are not the source. I mean, that can be another one of those hard concepts to understand. The physical manifestations of turbulence on the sun is not the source of the turbulence on the sun. That is a much deeper intrinsic issue. The electromagnetic emanations, which are the sources of heat and light, are not attached to the filaments. Now, that is not to take away from the power of a filament, because if you are unaware, we can be destroyed like that by one of these filaments. If it snaps off and comes in our direction, it will be a world-changing event. Every single electronic on the entire planet will be burnt. Every single circuit inside every single electrical everything, if it is not grounded and encased in a Faraday cage, almost certainly will be unusable, right? You will not be able to get the power back on and then plug in the TV, because the TV will be fried. Every single thing inside of your house, inside of your car, inside of the entirety of the planet will be fried in a microsecond as soon as this thing snaps in our direction. We are only safe in the relative safety that we have, and that it doesn't happen all that often. Most of the time when a filament snaps, it snaps in another direction. Even if we are just grazed by that snap, we still suffer problems. We have had that happen a couple of times in the last few years. There has been a filament snapped and it just barely missed us, but it caused airline delays and problems with the Wi-Fi. It caused transformer fires. It caused power lines to catch on fire. That is a glancing blow that almost didn't touch us at all. That filament coming at us holds light and heat, but it is not the source of light and heat. And that is an important distinction to maintain. Back to the text. Here we have a surrounding envelope of photogenic matter. Footnote 2. That matter is just like the reflection in a mirror of the flame from a photogenic lamp wick. And again, I disagree. Which pendulates with mighty energies, and by communicating its motion to the ethereal medium in stellar space, produces heat and light in far distant worlds. We have said that those forms have been compared to certain organisms, and Herschel says, though it would be too daring to speak of such organizations as partaking of life. Why not? Footnote 3. See 5 Years of Theosophy, answer to this speculation of Herschel's. Yet we do not know what vital action is competent to develop heat, light, and electricity. Can it be that there is truth in this fine thought? May the pulsing of vital matter in the central sun of our system be the source of all the life which crowds the earth, and without doubt overspreads the other planets, to which the sun is the mighty minister. Now, we have had some proof that there might be the possibility of life on a couple of other planets, but it is not extensive, as far as we know, at least in this solar system. We have sent probes out there. We have gotten close to most of the planets, and we can pretty conclusively determine that there is not above microscopic life on any of them. There is a possibility of some carbon-based life forms on, I believe Mars has some in the ice caps, the possibility of, and maybe Venus, but most of the other ones, it has been pretty conclusively dismissed. Now, that is talking about terrestrial life and the incorporated forms that we believe in, not necessarily some spiritual place, right? It could be that heaven is actually Jupiter. I doubt it, very seriously, not the least of which, because heaven, as the concept most people understand, is not a real thing. And so, just keep that in mind, right? The sun is the source of all life on this planet for sure. There is nothing alive that does not partake in the sun in some manner whatsoever, except a few cave-dwelling things, and that is a whole different ball of wax that we have not unraveled yet. So, back to the text. Occultism answers these queries in the affirmative, and science will find this to be the case one day. Again, on page 156, Mr. Hunt writes, "But regarding life, vital force, as a power far more exalted than either light, heat, or electricity, and indeed capable of exerting a controlling power over them all, this is absolutely occult. We are certainly disposed to view with satisfaction that speculation which supposes this photosphere to be the primary seat of vital power, and to regard with a poetic pleasure that hypothesis which refers to the solar energies to life. Thus, we have an important scientific corroboration for one of our fundamental dogmas, namely that A. The sun is the storehouse of vital force, which is the noumena of electricity. It is a storehouse only in that it is a capacitor. It stores up and emanates, not necessarily like just a battery absorbing. When I guess this battery does emanate if you attach to it, but you know what I'm saying, right? This isn't some well that it is coming only from there. It is instead receiving from somewhere and issuing out. That is almost certainly going to be proven true, probably in the next decade. And B, that it is from its mysterious, never-to-be-fathomed depths that issue those life currents which thrill through space, as though the organisms of every living thing on earth. For, see what another eminent physician says, who calls this, our life fluid, nervous ether. Change a few sentences in the article, extracts from which you now follow, and you have another quasi-occult treatise on life force. This, once, it is again Dr. B.W. Richardson who gives his views in the Popular Science Review on nervous ether, and he has on sun force and earth force. The idea attempted to be conveyed by the theory is that between the molecules of the matter, solid or fluid, of which the nervous organisms, and indeed of which all the organic parts of a body are composed, there exists a refined, subtle medium, vaporous or gaseous, which holds the molecules in a condition for motion upon each other, and for arrangement and rearrangement of form, that is, ionic bonds, a medium by and through which all motion is conveyed, by and through which the one organ or part of the body is held in communion with the other parts, by which and through which the outer living world communicates with the living man, a medium, which, being present, enables the phenomena of life to be demonstrated, and which, being universally absent, leaves the body actually dead. That would be electromagnetism. And the whole solar system falls into pralaya. The author might have added, but let us read further. I use the word ether in its general sense as meaning a very light, vaporous, or gaseous matter. I use plasma. I use it, in short, as the astronomer uses it when he speaks of the ether of space, by which he means a subtle but material medium. When I speak of a nervous ether, I do not convey that the ether is existent in nervous structure only. I believe truly that it is a special part of the nervous organization. But as nerves pass into all structures that have capacities for movement and sensibilities, so the nervous ether passes into all such parts, and as the nervous ether is, according to my view, a direct product from blood, so we may look upon it as a part of the atmosphere of the blood. Now, what he is talking about here is the electrical current that runs when you make a decision, right? We talk about the Trinity all of the time. There's the body, the temple of God by which you navigate 5D space. There is the soul, which makes the decisions for the temple, right? The individualized slice of divinity. Not divine, like you are not a god, but you are a piece of God. A tiny little piece of God, but so are these glasses. So is this glass and the tea in it. All of that is a piece of God. Everything that you ever see is a piece of God. Not a full representative, but a piece of. And then finally you have the Spirit, right? Now the Spirit is all things. It is literally everything at one time. Just like we said, right? The tea and the glasses, they are part of the Spirit. It is literally every single atom in existence all at the same time. And it is the space between those atoms. And it is the space inside those atoms. You got the neutron and the proton, and around it circulates an electron. That space between the nucleus and the electron, that's part of the Spirit too. You have active and you have inactive. Inactive, you can see through it. It surrounds you right now. You are walking through inactive plasma as we speak. And you're breathing it. You are moving your hands through it. Whatever it is that you do, you are doing it in plasma as a part of plasma. The active plasma is the organization change. It is the ionic bonds turning from what it was into what it is. And in this context, it is when you, the soul, makes the decision to wiggle your fingers. You, the soul, don't actually make the fingers wiggle. You make the decision, and then a signal is sent out along your nervous system as electricity. And that tells you to wiggle your fingers. That actually makes it happen. The Holy Spirit, the active part of the plasma, is turning the next into the now into the next. It's the part that turns your breath into oxygen in your fingertips. It is the part that takes your food and digests it into fuel. Right? It is lightning and it is flame. It is all light, motion, and heat is a form of activated plasma. And so it is not produced from the blood. It is contained within the blood, which is a conduit for it to actually work. It is inside the blood, right? It is the part that takes the oxygen when you breathe in and it puts it inside the individualized red blood cell. That is the Holy Spirit in motion. And then when the blood cell moves from your lungs to your finger, that is the Holy Spirit in motion as well. It is the part that makes you breathe when you are asleep. Back to the text. The evidence in favor of the existence of an elastic medium pervading the nervous matter and capable of being influenced by simple pressure is all convincing. In nervous structure there is unquestionably a true nervous fluid, as our predecessors taught. That is not true. It is electricity, not a nervous fluid. Footnote 1. Paracelsus, for one, who called it liquor vitae, and Archaeus. The precise chemical, footnote 2, or rather alchemical composition. The precise chemical composition of this fluid is not yet well known, and never will be. The physical characters of it have been little studied, because there are none. Whether it moves in currents, we do not know. Whether it circulates, we do not know. Whether it is formed in the centers and passes from them to the nerves, or whether it is formed everywhere where blood enters nerve, we do not know. The exact uses of the fluid we do not consequently know. It occurs to my mind, however, that the veritable fluid of nervous matter is not out of itself sufficient to act as the subtle medium that connects the outer with the inner universe of man and animal. I think, and this is the modification I suggest to the older theory, there must be another form of matter present during life, a matter which exists in the condition of vapor or gas, which pervades the whole nervous organism, surrounds as an enveloping atmosphere. That is true. That is electromagnetism. Footnote 3. This vital force radiates around man like a luminous sphere, says Paracelsus in Peregrinum. Surrounds as an enveloping atmosphere each molecule of nervous structure, and is the medium of all motion, communicated to and from the nervous centers. When it is once fairly presented to the mind that during life there is in the animal body a finely diffused form of matter, a vapor filling every part, and even stored in some parts, a matter constantly renewed by the vital chemistry, a matter as easily disposed of as the breath after it has served its purpose, a new flood of light breaks on the intelligence. A new flood of light is certainly thrown on the wisdom of ancient and medieval occultism and its votaries. For Paracelsus wrote the same thing more than 300 years ago, namely, in the 16th century, as follows. The whole of the microcosm is potentially contained in the liquor vitae, a nerve fluid, and see, he misunderstood. It's not a fluid, but he is true. The whole of the microcosm is indeed, in which is contained the nature, quality, character, and essence of beings, the generation hominis. The archeus, or liquor vitae, is an essence that is equally distributed in all parts of the body. The spiritus vitae takes its origin from the spiritus mundi. Being an emanation of the latter, it contains the elements of all cosmic influences, and is, therefore, the cause by which the action of the stars, cosmic forces, upon the invisible body of man, his vital linkshadrier, may be explained. The Viribus Membrorum. See Life of Paracelsus by Franz Hartmann. Had Dr. Richardson studied all the secret works of Paracelsus, he would not have been obliged to confess so often, "We do not know, it is not known to us," etc., etc., nor would he have ever pronounced the following sentence, recanting the best portions of his independent rediscovery, in which he says, "It may be urged that in this line of thought is included no more than the theory of the existence of the ether, supposed to pervade space. It may be said that this universal ether pervades all the organisms of the animal body, as from without, and as part of every organization. This view would be pantheism physically discovered if it was true. It fails to be true, it would destroy the individuality of every individual sense. We fail to see it, and we know it is not so. Pantheism may be physically rediscovered. It was known, seen, and felt by the whole of antiquity." I disagree. Pantheism manifests itself in the vast expanse of the starry heavens, in the breathing of the seas and oceans, and the quiver of life in the smallest blade of grass. No, it doesn't. Right? That all of that, to me, can be attributed to the one true God. That you don't have to have 5,000 entities holding stars in place. Right? You don't have to have an entity driving the wind. You don't have to have an entity turning the planet. All of these things can be explained by science these days, but even if you were to suppose a God, which I do, right? I say that there is an omnipresent, omniscient God, but he is not sitting on a throne in heaven waiting to punish you. But even if you attribute these things to a divinity, like, it doesn't work in reality, right? Even if you go and watch, like, I'm reading through the Iliad. If you're unaware, that is another one of the things that I'm doing. And it's funny to see the interaction attributed to the gods, right? Well, there's this whole argument going on between these people, but it's the gods that are actually making it happen, right? They're stirring up discontent in these people's hearts, so they have no choice but to go to war. Or the god is causing deceit. It wasn't the man who actually disappeared in the middle of the fight. It was a god that snatched him out. I mean, it's just funny. Philosophy rejects one finite and imperfect God in the universe, as the anthropomorphic deity of the monotheist is represented by his followers. And see, that is where I am different. I am a monotheist. There is only one God. But I don't anthropomorphize God. I use he because most people use he, and it's easy to understand. But to me, God is beyond sexes. He is not male and female. He is the culmination of both in perfection. It is both positive and negative at the exact same time. It is what you call sin and what you call virtue at the same time. I don't need to make him a guy sitting there looking like me, waiting to take my side on things. It repudiates, in its name of philotheosophia, the grotesque idea that infinite absolute deity should, or rather could, have any, whether direct or indirect, relation to infinite elusive evolutions of matter, and therefore cannot imagine a universe outside that deity, or the latter absent from the smallest speck of animate or inanimate substance. Footnote. This does not mean that every bush, tree, or stone is God or a God, but only that every speck of manifested material of cosmos belongs to and is the substance of God, however low it may have fallen in its cyclic gyration through the eternities of the ever-becoming, and also that every such speck individually and cosmos collectively is an aspect and a reminder of that one universal soul, which philosophy refuses to call God, thus limiting the eternal and ever-present root and essence. Why either the ether of space or nervous ether should destroy the individuality of every sense seems incomprehensible for one acquainted with the real nature of that nervous ether under its Sanskrit, or rather esoteric and Kabbalistic name. Dr. Richardson agrees that if we did not individually produce the medium of communication between ourselves and the outer world, if it were produced from without and adapted to one kind of vibration alone, there were fewer senses required than we possess. For, taking two illustrations only, ether of light is not adapted for sound. And yet we hear as well as see, while air, the medium of motion and sound, is not the medium of light, and yet we see and hear. This is not so. The opinion that pantheism fails to be true because it would destroy the individuality of every individual sense shows that all the conclusions of the learned doctor are based on the modern physical theories, though he would fain reform them. But he will find it impossible to do this unless he allows the existence of spiritual senses to replace the gradual atrophy of the physical. We see and hear, in accordance, of course, in Dr. Richardson's mind, with the explanations of the phenomena of sight and hearing, by that same materialistic science which postulates that we cannot see or hear otherwise. The occultists and mystics know better. The Vedic Aryans were as familiar with the mysteries of sound and color as our physiologists are on the physical plane, but they had mastered the secrets of both on the planes inaccessible to the materialist. They knew of a double set of senses, spiritual and material, In the man who is deprived of one or more senses, the remaining become the more developed. E.g., the blind man will recover his sight through the senses of touch, of hearing, etc., and he who is deaf will be able to hear through sight, but seeing audibly the words uttered by the lips and mouth of the speaker. But these are cases that belong to the world of matter still. The spiritual senses, those that act on the higher plane of consciousness, are rejected a priori by physiology because the latter is ignorant of the sacred science. It limits the action of ether to vibrations and dividing it from air, though air is simply differentiated and compound ether, makes it assume functions to fit in with these special theories of the physiologist. But there is more real science in the teachings of the Upanishads, when these are correctly understood, than the Orientalists, who do not understand them at all, and are ready to admit. Mental, as well as physical correlations of these seven senses, 7 on the physical and 7 on the mental planes, are clearly explained and defined in the Vedas, and especially in the Upanishad called Anugita. The indestructible and the destructible, such as the double manifestation of the self. Of these, the indestructible is the existent, the true essence or nature of self, the underlying principles. The manifestation as an individual or entity is called destructible. Thus speaks the ascetic in Anugita. And also, everyone who is twice born, initiated, knows, such as the teachings of the ancients, space is the first entity. Now, space, akasa, or the noumenon of ether, has one quality, and that is sound only. And the qualities of sound are Shagda, Rishabha, Gandhara, Madhyama, Panchama, and beyond these 5, Nishada and Dhyavata, the Hindu gamut. These 7 notes of the scale are the principles of sound. There are 8 notes in the scale. The qualities of every element, as of every sense, are septenary, and to judge and dogmatize on them from their manifestation, likewise sevenfold in itself, on the material or objective plane is quite arbitrary. For it is only by the self emancipating itself from these 7 causes of illusion that one acquires the knowledge, secret wisdom, of the qualities of objects of sense on their dual plane of manifestation, the visible and the invisible. Thus it is said, state this wonderful mystery, hear the assignment of causes exhaustively, the nose and the tongue and the eye and the skin and the ear as the 5th organ of sense, mind and understanding. Footnote. The division of the physical senses into 5 comes to us from great antiquity, but while adopting the number, no modern philosopher has asked himself how these senses could exist, in example, be perceived and used in a self-conscious way, unless there was the 6th sense, mental perception to register and record them, and, this for the metaphysicians and occultists, the 7th to preserve the spiritual fruition and remembrance thereof, as in a book of life which belongs to karma. The ancients divided the senses into 5 simply because their teachers, the initiates, stopped at hearing, as being that sense which developed in the physical plane, got dwarfed, rather limited to this plane, only at the beginning of the 5th race. The 4th race already had begun to lose the spiritual condition, so preeminently developed in the 3rd race. Here's another thing by which I differ, right? We have the 5 physical senses which everyone is familiar with, but there are 2 more, at least. Probably 3, but that is including something, right? We have sight, touch, smell, taste, and sound. You're familiar with those. We have also, in my estimation, a close extra and a far extra. And I know that those words aren't probably specific enough, but The close extra is something like this. You're in a forest and it's getting dark and you're feeling like it's time to go, so you get to moving out and then you feel a little prickling, like something's watching you. And you turn, and there, behind you, never making a sound, you see a predator. That is a close extra sense. You get a tingle, you get a push, and you're like, what is that? And you turn and you look, and there it is. There are many different manifestations of this, but that is within view, like you are close enough to see it, right? You're close enough to feel it, you're close enough to affect it for it to be right here, right now. Another is far extra, which is there are accounts of twins. Twins are the best iteration of this particular thing. And they live on opposite sides of the country, right? And then you're one of the twins and you're like, what just happened? Something is wrong. And you call your twin and they're in the hospital. That happens repeatedly. That is an extra sense. You have an extra sense, but it is not within your dome of responsibility. You can't touch it with your hands. You're not in the immediate vicinity, but you knew incontrovertibly that there was something wrong right now. That is an extra sense, and it is far. And then the eighth one, to me, would be none, right? It is both the emanation from and the return to. That is the state in which you enter when you are doing meditation, right? You do your prayers, which is you actively doing things, and then you do meditation, which is you not actively doing anything, right? You are focusing on your breath until you forget about the breath, and then you are existing with no real physical sensation, but more of a unification with all things. That would be the eighth, or none, to me. That is my speculations on these senses. I do believe that 8 is the fundamental harmonic of most things, not 7. And so I will link the video for the fundamental harmonics of life so you can understand why I say that. Mind and understanding. These 7 senses should be understood to be the causes of, the knowledge of, their qualities. Smell and taste, and color, sound, and touch as the 5th, the object of the mental operation, and the object of the understanding, the highest spiritual sense or perception. These 7 are causes of action. He who smells, he who eats, he who sees, he who speaks, he who hears as the 5th, he who thinks, and he who understands. These 7 should be regarded as the causes of the agents. Footnote 2. The modern commentators, failing to comprehend these subtle meanings of the ancient scholists, take the sentence, causes of the agents, to mean that the powers of the smelling, etc., when attributed to the self, make him appear as an agent, as an active principle, which is entirely fanciful. These 7 are understood to be the causes of the agents, because the objects are causes and their enjoyment causes an impression. It means, esoterically, that these 7 senses, are caused by the agents, which are the deities, for what does, or can, the sentence which follow this one mean. Thus, it is said, these 7 senses are the causes of emancipation. That would be the 8th in my theoreticals there. An example, when these causes are made ineffectual. And among the learned, the wise initiates, who understand the qualities which are in the position, in the nature, rather, of the deities, each in its place, means simply that the learned understand the nature of the noumena, of the various phenomena, and that qualities, in this instance, mean the qualities of the higher planetary, or gods, or elementary gods, or intelligences, which rule the elements and their products, and not at all the senses, as the modern commentator thinks. For the learned do not suppose their senses to have aught to do with them, any more than with their self. These, the agents, being possessed of qualities, sattva, rajas, tamas, enjoy their own qualities, agreeable and disagreeable. Anugita. Then one reads in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, the deity, or Krishna, saying, "Only some know me truly, earth, water, fire, air, space, or akasa, ether, mind, understanding, and egoism, or the perception of all the former on the elusive plane. This is a lower form of my nature. Know that there is another form of my nature, and higher than this which is animate. O you of mighty arms, and by which this universe is upheld, all this is woven upon me like numbers of pearls upon a thread." This is one of those things that gets on my nerves. These inclusions here, the explanations are like apologies for the Bible, right? Know another nature, and higher than this, which is animate, speaks for itself. You don't have to add know that there is another form of my nature. You don't have to know that. This is an extrapolation that doesn't necessarily belong in there, but is in there to change the flavor of the way it's spoken. All right, back to the text. Sorry, that's just a thing that bugs me, right? You see that in Bible studies all of the time. Somebody's like, this thing happened, but it had to happen in order for this other thing to be true, right? And so it just annoys me. I am the taste in the, like, you can do that, but make it part of the footnote, right? Make a footnote saying that this is my thing. And I get that that's inside of a parentheses, but it's kind of interjected in there in a way that I'm not fond of. All right. I am the taste in the water, O son of Kunti. I am the light of the sun and moon. I am sound, an example, the occult essence which underlies all these and the other qualities of the various things mentioned. In space, the fragrant smell in the earth, refulgence in the fire, etc., etc. Truly, then, one should study occult philosophy before one begins to verify and seek the mysteries of nature on its surface alone, as he alone, who knows the truth about the qualities of nature, who understands the creation of all entities, is emancipated from error, says the preceptor, accurately understanding the great tree of which the unperceived, occult nature, the root of all, is the sprout from the seed, Parabrahman, which consists of the understanding, Mahat, or universal intelligent soul, as its trunk, the branches of which are the great egoism, and the hulls of which are the sprouts, namely the senses, of which the great, occult or invisible, elements are the flower bunches. All right, we have a footnote on egoism and a footnote on flower bunches. I want to point out that this parenthetical is different than the other one, right? This is more of an explanatory, where the other one was more of an insertion. When it's like this is telling you that Parabrahman is talking about the seed, where the other one was trying to explain a little bit more in a different way. Footnote 1, egoism. Ahamkara, I suppose, that ego-ship or ahamship, which leads to every error. And the second one was the elements of the 5 mantras of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the producers of the grosser elements. All right. We did it. Flower bunches, the gross elements, the gross objective matter, the smaller boughs, which are always possessed of leaves, always possessed of flowers, which is eternal, and the seed of which is in the Brahman, the deity, and cutting it with that excellent sword, knowledge, secret wisdom, one attains immortality and cast off birth and death. This is the tree of life, the Asvata tree, only after the cutting of which the slave of life and death, man, can be emancipated. This is another one of those things that really get on my nerve. This is a victim mentality outlook, right? You are not here as a punishment. That is not why you are incorporated. You are incorporated to learn lessons, and some of them suck. True. Some of them are wonderful, right? You can learn how to live with the love of your life for 60 years, or you can learn to grieve the death of your child. They are not the same, but they are both lessons. You are meant to learn about grief. It is part of life. It sucks. Nobody wants that particular lesson. There are a bunch of lessons like that, but that doesn't mean that this is a prison. That doesn't mean that we are here as a victim of karma. That doesn't mean that at all. And this viewpoint, that it's only after this that you can attain this, become not the slave of life and death. In part, that's true, right? Only through understanding do you come to the realization that this is not a prison planet. Everybody else is telling you it is. It is only after a greater understanding that you can see your part in the small little piece that you play in the greater scope of existence. You are here incorporated willfully, on purpose, with a job to do, lessons to learn, things to overcome, and none of that makes you a victim. You have no reason to be emancipated. But the men of science know not, nor will they hear of the sort of knowledge used by the adepts and ascetics. Hence, the one-sided remarks of the most liberal among them, based on and flowing from undue importance given to the arbitrary divisions and classification of physical science. Occultism heeds them very little, and nature still less. The whole range of physical phenomena proceed from the primary of ether, akasa, as dual-natured akasa proceeds from undifferentiated chaos, so called, the latter being the primary aspect of mula prakriti, the root matter, and the first abstract idea one can form of Parabrahman. Modern science may divide its hypothetically conceived ether in as many ways as it likes. The real ether of space will remain as it is throughout. It has its 7 principles, as all the rest of nature has. No, there are 8. And where there was no ether, there will be no sound. As it is, the vibrating soundboard in nature, in all of its 7 differentiations. This is the first mystery of the initiates of old have learned. Our present normal physical senses were, from our present point of view, abnormal in those days of slow and progressive downward evolution and fall into matter. And there was a day when all that which in our modern times is regarded as phenomena, so puzzling to the physiologists now compelled to believe in them, such as thought transference, clairvoyance, clairaudience, etc. In short, all that which is now called wonderful and abnormal, all that and much more belong to the senses and faculties common to all humanity. Those are extra far and extra near. We are, however, cycling back and cycling forward. An example, having lost in spirituality that which we acquired in physical development until almost the end of the 4th race. We, mankind, are as gradually and imperceptibly losing now in the physical all that we regained once more in the spiritual re-evolution. This process must go on until the period which will bring the 6th root race on a parallel line with the spirituality of the 2nd, long extinct mankind. But this will hardly be understood at present. We must return to Dr. Richardson's hopeful, though somewhat incorrect, hypotheses about nervous ether. Under the misleading translation of the word as space, akasa, it has just been shown in the ancient Hindu system as the firstborn of the One, having but one quality, sound, which is septenary. In esoteric language, this One is the Father, deity, and sound is synonymous with logos, verbum, or the Son. Whether consciously or otherwise, it must be the latter, and Dr. Richardson, while preaching an occult doctrine, chooses the lowest form of septenary nature of that sound and speculates upon it, adding, "The theory I offer is that the nervous ether is an animal product. In different classes of animals it may differ in physical quality so as to be adapted to the special wants of the animal, but essentially it plays one part in all animals and is produced in all in the same way. Herein lies the nucleus of error leading to all the resultant mistaken views. This nervous ether is the lowest principle of the primordial essence which is life. It is animal vitality, diffused in all nature and acting according to the conditions it finds for its activity. It is not an animal product, but the living animal. The living flower or plants are its products. The animal tissues only absorb it according to their more or less morbid or healthy state, as do physical materials and structures, in their primogenial state, nota bene, and henceforward, from the moment of the birth of the entity, are regulated, strengthened, and fed by it. It descends into a larger supply to vegetation in the Sushumna sun ray, which lights and feeds the moon, and it is through her beams that it pours its light upon and penetrates man and animal, more during their sleep and rest than when they are in full activity. Therefore, Dr. Richardson errs again in stating that the nervous ether is not, according to my idea of it, in itself active, nor an excitant of animal motion in the sense of a force, but it is essential as supplying the conditions by which the motion is rendered possible. It is just the reverse. It is the conductor of all vibrations of heat, of light, of sound, of electrical action, of mechanical friction. Footnote. The conductor in the sense of upadi, a material or physical basis, but as the second principle of the universal soul and vital force in nature, it is intelligently guided by the fifth principle thereof. It holds the nervous system throughout in perfect tension during states of life, true, by the exercise that it is disposed of, rather generated, and when demand for it is greater than the supply, its deficiency is indicated by nervous collapse or exhaustion. Footnote 2. And too great an exuberance of it in the nervous system leads as often to disease and death. If it were the animal system which generated it, such would not be the case, surely. Hence, the latter emergency shows its independence of the system and connection with the sun force, as Metcalfe and Professor Hunt explain it. It accumulates in the nervous centers during sleep, bringing them, if I may so speak, to their due tone, and therewith raising the muscles to awakening and renewed life. Just so. This is quite correct and as comprehensible. Therefore, the body fully renewed by it presents capacity for motion, fullness of form, life. The body bereft of it presents inertia, the configuration of shrunken death, the evidence of having lost something physical that was in it when it lived. Modern science denies the existence of a vital principle. This extract is a clear proof of its grand mistake. But this physical something, that we call life fluid, the liquor vitae of Paracelsus, has not deserted the body as Dr. Richardson thinks. It has only changed its state from activity to passivity and become latent owing to the too morbid state of the tissues on which it has no more hold. Once the rigor mortis absolute, the liquor vitae, will reawaken into action and begin its work on the atoms chemically. Brahma, Vishnu, the creator and the preserver of life, will have transformed himself into Siva, the destroyer. Lastly, he writes on page 387, the nervous ether may be poisoned. It may, have diffused through it, by simple gaseous diffusion, other gases or vapors derived from without. It may derive from within products of substances swallowed and ingested, or gases of decomposition produced during disease in the body itself. And the learned gentleman might have added on the same occult principle, that the nervous ether of one person can be poisoned by the nervous ether of another person, or his auric emanations. But see what Paracelsus said of the nervous ether. The archaeus is of a magnetic nature and attracts or repels other sympathetic or antipathetic forces belonging to the same plane. The less power of resistance for astral influences a person possesses, the more he will be subject to such influences. The vital force is not enclosed in man, but radiates within and around him like a luminous sphere, aura. That's the divine chakra, and it may be made to act at a distance. It may poison the essence of life, blood, and cause diseases, or it may purify it after it has been made impure and restore the health. Peregrinum, Life of Paracelsus by Dr. F. Hardman. That the two, archeus and nervous ether, are identical is shown by the English scientist who says that the tension of it generally may be too high or too low, that it may be so owing to local changes in the nervous matter it invests. Under sharp excitation it may vibrate as if in a storm and plunge every muscle under cerebral or spinal control into uncontrolled motion, unconscious convulsions. This is called nervous excitation, but no one, except occultists, know the reason of such nervous perturbation or explains the primary causes of it. The principle of life may kill when too exuberant, as also when there is too little of it, but this principle on the manifested, or R plane, is but the effect and result of the intelligent action of the host, collectively. Principle, the manifesting life and light. It is itself subordinate to and emanates from the ever-invisible, eternal, and absolute one life, in a descending and a reascending scale of hierarchic degrees, a true septenary ladder, with sound, or the logos, at the upper end, and the vidyadharas. Footnote. In a recent work on the symbolism in Buddhism and Christianity, in Buddhism and Roman Catholicism rather, many later rituals and dogmas in Northern Buddhism and its popular exoteric form being identical with those of the Latin Church. Some curious facts are to be found. The author of this volume, with more pretensions than erudition, has indiscriminately crammed into his work ancient and modern Buddhist teachings, and sorely confused Lamanism with Buddhism. On page 404 of this volume, called Buddhism in Christendom, or Jesus the Essene, our pseudo-Orientalist, devotes himself to criticizing the 7 principles of the esoteric Buddhist, and attempts to ridicule them. On page 405, the closing page, he speaks enthusiastically of the Vidyadharas, the 7 great legions of dead men made wise. Now, these Vidyadharas, whom some Orientalists call demigods, are in fact, exoterically, a kind of siddhas, affluent in devotion, and esoterically, they are identical with the 7 classes of Pitras, one class of which endow man in the 3rd race with self-consciousness by incarnating in the human shells. The Hymn to the Sun, at the end of his queer volume of Mosaic, which endows Buddhism with a personal God, is an unfortunate thrust at the very proofs so elaborately collected by the unlucky author. Theosophists are fully aware that Mr. Rhys David has expressed his opinion on their beliefs. Likewise, he said that the theories propounded by the author of esoteric Buddhism were not Buddhism and were not esoteric. The remark is the result of a. the unfortunate mistake of writing Buddhism instead of Buddhism or Buddhism. An example, the connecting the system with Gautama's religion instead of with the secret wisdom taught by Krishna, Sankaracharya, and many others, as much as by Buddha. And b. the impossibility of Mr. Rhys David knowing anything of true esoteric teachings. But he is, at all events, the greatest Pali and Buddhist scholar of the day, and whatever he may say is entitled to respectful hearing. But when one who knows no more of exoteric Buddhism on scientific and materialistic lines than he knows of esoteric philosophy, defames those whom he honors with his spite, and assumes with the theosophist the airs of a profound scholar, one can only smile and heartily laugh at him. and at the upper end, and the Vidhyadharas, the inferior Petries, at the lower. Of course, the occultists are fully aware of the fact that the vitalist fallacy, so derided by Vogt and Huxley, is, nevertheless, still countenanced in very high scientific quarters. And, therefore, they are happy to feel that they do not stand alone. Thus, Professor de Quatrefages writes, "It is very true we do not know what life is, but no more do we know what the force is that sets the stars in motion. Living beings are heavy, and therefore subject to gravitation. They are the seat of numerous and various physico-chemical phenomena which are indispensable to their existence, and which must be referred to the action of etherodynamy, electricity, heat, etc. But these phenomena are here manifested under the influence of another force. Life is not antagonistic to the inanimate forces, but it governs and rules their actions by its laws." Footnote: the human species. And that is going to bring us to the end of life, force, or gravity. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. The main problem that I have with this is definitional, right? My understanding and their understanding is not the same. It is close in many ways, but I believe in 8 and not 7, and that is a very, very vital step. I have a lot of reasons why I believe that, and they will be in this freestanding video that will be linked up here called The Fundamental Harmonics of Life, where we talk about how almost everything is actually divided into 8, including you in various ways. It's an interesting study, I guess, would be the best way to put it. But again, it is my speculation based upon things that I believe have been directly revealed to me, and so you don't have to believe it, right? Even the things that I emphatically stand upon, you don't have to believe them. They are my speculations. I emphatically stand that there is one God and that he has no gender. That is too much for some people. Some people need a God that is sitting on a throne waiting to judge them. That's the only way that they can function. I don't have that problem. Some people don't need that, like me, and so I am here for those people. I am here to try to clarify to the best of my ability where I differentiate with Mrs. Blavatsky on these things, so that maybe we can come to a truer understanding. If the things that were recorded here were actually correct, besides the planetary evidence that we did, we would see more evidence of it manifested in life, right? If these things were true, more people would do them, right? Once the knowledge isn't there, until you have the knowledge, nobody can take an action upon it. But once you have the knowledge, then you should be making adjustments. Right? That's not to say throw out what you believe completely, even though that may be a very valid thing. But you should always be willing to adjust in the face of evidence. We have a lot of evidence now that she didn't. And so I try not to cast too much aspersion back in time. I try not to judge too hard, because people were just trying to understand something. That is true for the Vedas, right? I haven't read through them in detail yet, right? We are going to get to that. But for the most part, what they have been explained in these couple of studies that we have done on them is that it was them trying to explain in the exact same way that I am. That it could be a direct divine revelation. I believe that I have been directly divinely revealed to. It could be a figment of my imagination. It could just be my logic working. I don't know. I take it as divine inspiration. I take it as divine revelation, and none of the things that I have had pointed out to me through divine revelation have been proven to be untrue. Right? It's not like some God who is external from me said these things. It is something that is like an understanding that quick. And it's like, oh, so that's how that works. Right? I try to be clear about those things, and I talk more about them for myself and my understanding of them in the Infinite Integrations playlist. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, a sub. Throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated here today, drop it in the comments. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. It will be greatly appreciated. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.